What we're going to do is have a look at a new topic, properties of geometrical figures, and we'll start off with looking at basic angles. Well, first of all, what is an angle? It's a measure of an amount of turning. So when we're talking about turning, we're looking at how far we're facing one direction and then starting to turn towards another direction. So here we have an angle of 57 degrees because as we've turned facing this way out towards that way, we've now turned 57 degrees. So the more we turn, the bigger our angle. The less we turn, the smaller our angle. So we're going to have a look at different types of angles that we're going to come across. So as you can see, the angles get larger and larger, and we can keep turning all the way around, and you can see that our angle's getting bigger. And if we go all the way around, we've gone one full revolution. Okay, so this is just a measure of an amount of turning. So we use degrees, and there's our symbol for degrees, to measure the size of angles. And we often use this Greek letter theta, but not always, to represent a particular angle that we don't know. And as I go through some examples and some later on videos and so on, I'll use something different from theta just so you get used to all we're doing is just marking an angle. So let's have a look. An acute angle. This is an angle that's between 0 and 90 degrees. So when we turn anywhere from 0 up to 90 degrees, any of those angles in between there are acute angles. So if we come back to our angle device here, you can see anywhere from 0 degrees up to 90 degrees, anywhere in between that are all acute angles. You can see, probably from primary school you might have been calling them sharp angles to start off with, but anything between 0 and 90 is an acute angle. But I can change them around so our acute angles look different, but anything between 0 and 90 degrees, our amount of turning, is an acute angle. So now we'll have a look at right angles. A right angle is 90 degrees. So we can see here an example of a right angle, and in the corner here we usually represent a right angle with a square in the corner. However, what we've got to be careful of is right angles aren't always in that orientation. We can spin it around and it's still a right angle. So we just need to be careful that when we're talking about right angles, they can be in any different orientation there. So quite often though, they're in this standard form that you see there. Okay, an obtuse angle. This is an angle that's between 90 and 180 degrees. So as you can see, we've turned past 90 degrees. So anywhere between 90 and 180 degrees is an obtuse angle. So if we come back here, we have a look, there's our 90 degrees. Once we start turning more than 90 degrees, then we now have obtuse angles formed. Anywhere up to and just less than 180 degrees. So anywhere between that 90 and 180. So anywhere in between here are all obtuse angles. Once we get to 180 degrees, we call this a straight angle because it forms a straight line. So any angle that forms a straight line is a straight angle and adds up to 180 degrees. And again, I can change the orientation of that straight angle so that it looks all different ways and yet it's still the same straight angle. So just be wary of that. They can be in all different orientations. Our next type of angles are what we call reflex angles. These are any angles that are between 180 degrees and 360 degrees. So here's an example of an angle that is a reflex angle. I've turned more than 180 degrees. And here's another one. I've turned more than 180 degrees. And we can have a look at that using this here. So if I turn there 180 degrees, if I turn more than that, I'm now into my reflex angles. So we're talking about the amount that we've turned What I'm not talking about is this inside bit here. I'm talking about how far we turned from where we started from. So we've turned now more than 180 degrees. Anywhere in this section is now a reflex angle. And the last basic type of angle that we need to know about is an angle of revolution. And that's where we've turned all the way around and looking back in the same direction that we started from. So, showing by here, if we started all the way from here and we turn in an anti-clockwise direction and we turn all the way back to where we started, we've gone 360 degrees. So all those different types of angles, as I just emphasised there, they're types of angles. What we're going to have a look at now is when we have to name angles. Not the type of angle, but actually naming angles. So to name angles, the best way to avoid any confusion is we use the angle symbol, which we'll look at in a moment, followed by 3 letters that are on the lines, and sometimes they're called arms or rays, of what actually forms the angle. So here are our lines or arms or rays that form the angle, and here's our angle that we've marked here. So there's our amount of turning from there around to there, or the opposite way. So we want to know how to name that angle. But what I need to do is I need to give it some points of reference. So I'm going to call this part here, which is the vertex, the corner where they meet, the vertex. I'll call that the letter K. I'll do another reference point on the other 2 arms. Call that one up, that a point up there R, and I point out this one Z. So what we're going to do now is learn how we actually name that angle. So yes, it is an acute angle, but I'm not after the type of angle. I actually want to name it. So if I have more lines in there, I know which particular angle I'm looking at. So I put the angle symbol, which looks like that. That's our angle symbol. Then I want 3 letters, R, K, Z. Now you'll notice that my K is in the middle. The vertex must be in the middle. Okay? Not K, R, Z, because that would indicate that the vertex is R. It's R, K, Z. The K is where the lines meet. That's our vertex. But I could have started here. So I could have actually had that as ZKR. Both of those angles are the same, noticing that the K is in the middle. So that's our basics about angles. So the types of angles and how we name angles.